So today I wanted to talk about something, and it's going to be a bit of a heavy topic. So if you do feel triggered about this, please go and take care of yourself, center yourself. If you need professional help, please go seek it. And just a little disclaimer again, I'm not a qualified health professional, so please don't take any of this as health advice. Seek the right professional help that you might need, and yeah, let's get into the video, eh? Oh, and before I get going, if you do find any of this content useful, please drop a like, comment and subscribe down in the comment section of the YouTube videos, or the same relevant thing in Spotify if you're watching or listening on Spotify. Anyhow, today I'm going to be talking about a topic that if I was monetized, this would get stricken straight away by YouTube, and it is about cide in New Zealand. So that's a word that always gets censored on YouTube, and you know what, it is what it is. Again, I'm not monetized, so I'm going to just use the correct word, whether it's... See, there's another word that they don't like, and I'll probably get in trouble for this, I don't know. Anyhow, in the line of work that I'm in, which deals with whānau harm, so, or the threat of and self-harm shows up, especially here in Taranaki, a fair amount. Okay, I'm not going to say a lot, but a good proportion seems to be those threats. Now, admittedly, sometimes it can be used as a means of control, sympathy, to get the others in your relationships to basically do what you want them to do, and it's a sick thing to do and a sick way of getting what you want, I suppose. So on the healthnz.govt.nz website, an overview of the 2024 to 2025 statistics say that there were 630 suspected self-inflicted in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The age standardised rate of suspected self-inflicted was 11 per 100,000 population. The rate of suspected self-inflicted in 2024-2025 was 3.1% lower than the average rate of suspected self-inflicted deaths over the last 16 financial years. Now, that's a whole heap of gobbledygook to some, but let's put it into another, I suppose, aspect. In 2024 and 2025, Māori had the highest rate of suspected self-inflicted at 18 per 100,000 population, followed by Europeans or others at 12.1 per 100,000 population. Pacific population at 7.4 per 100,000 population, and Asian population of 3.5 per 100,000 population. So basically, what's that saying? So basically what it's saying is Māori had a higher suicide rate than any other ethnicity in New Zealand, with the Europeans having probably the second higher rate. Um, and it's a really sad thing to hear. Now, what brought me to do this video is the fact that a lot of us have lost loved ones to self-harm, and I suppose if I was monetized, I'd be sitting there saying, self-unaliving. Sounds so silly when you put it that way, but it is what it is, Unfortunately, some people have a tendency to think that one thing that's driving numbers globally is online fads, where people will talk about doing that. And unfortunately, there were articles probably over the last 10 years where it was suspected that there were suicide pacts going on. And I'm not saying it's true or untrue. I couldn't really give you that analysis. So, I decided to look at a UK website called harmless.org.uk, and basically the title of this was about myths versus reality. So one myth is that talking about suicide gives people ideas and encourages suicide. The reality is that evidence shows that talking about suicide will not put the idea in someone's mind. If someone has already considered suicide, then talking about it may be a relief, and is likely to be the first step to getting help. Open and honest conversations actively prevent suicide. Yep, I can sort of see the logic in that statement, and it's not necessarily wrong. Another myth is that people who talk about suicide don't actually go through with it. The reality is that sometimes people are very direct, saying that things like, I want to kill myself. However, some people may say things such as, there's no point to my life, or I just can't cope any longer. Regardless of how they talk about ending their life, it shows that they are thinking about it and letting others know how low they feel. This does not mean that they will not go through with it. They need help and support. Now, that is a fairly good way of looking at it, I suppose. Another myth: you can tell who is likely to feel suicidal from their clothes, hairstyle, music they listen to. The reality is that there is not a type of person who feels suicidal. Many people have suicidal thoughts at some point in their lives, from all walks of life. It is important not to make judgments about who is affected by suicide. It can affect anyone at any time, and that is an accurate statement. Another myth: only crazy people think about it. The reality: the word crazy is very stigmatized and dehumanizing for people who experience mental health difficulties. People thinking about suicide may feel desperate, distressed, angry, and exhausted, but this does not mean they are crazy. And again, that is another fair comment. Now, why do people feel so? There could be any number of reasons why someone might feel suicidal, and often it can be a mixture of different things. Some reasons include a relationship ending, death of someone close, feeling overwhelmed and depressed, worried about practical difficulties including finances and unemployment, illness or injury, or being bullied or harassed. Now, looking at that article, a lot of those points I would myself personally agree with. Having met a few people who have had, tried, and tried to commit, or have had the ideations, now for a little bit of honesty, there was a time in my life where I felt the same. And I've told this to a few people, and that was at a time where I was in a bit of a downward spiral, drinking constantly, doing drugs, been through a few relationship breakups that I thought were really strong relationships, but now I realise, or after looking back on things, some of those relationships were unhealthy too, and I've mentioned this in past videos. I'm also a survivor of and whānau harm, and I'd hit a real low point in my life, and while I was a chef, there were times there where I'd grab my own chef and start holding them to my wrists. What was the one thing that stopped me was I thought about my whānau and the people that me doing that to would affect, and that was something I could not put my family through. So there were times where I sought help, or I had discussions with people about certain issues, and I'll tell you what, that helped a great deal. My biggest saviour was when my ex-partner, who passed away about a year ago, told me that she was pregnant with my daughter, who is now 20, and I tell my daughter this all the time, she is my fantail. She was the guide to me changing my life, and gave me something that I feel was worth living for. And I've told my daughter this a number of times. She pulled me out of the darkness, and I'm forever grateful for that. Anyhow, another thing I wanted to mention was, or look at, was the commonality of ideations and neurodiversity. So I looked at an article on a website called mindfulcenter.org, and how neurodiversity intersects with risk. And the term neurodiversity was coined in the late 1990s to describe the natural variations in human brains and minds. Instead of framing conditions such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, or other developmental differences solely as deficits, neurodiversity emphasizes that there are part of the spectrum of human diversity. Neurodivergence does not inherently cause suffering, but stigma, lack of accommodation, and misunderstanding often do. For many people, embracing neurodiversity means affirming identity and fostering belonging. However, it is equally important to acknowledge the mental health challenges that can accompany being misunderstood, marginalised, or unsupported. suicide risk among neurodivergent individuals is one such challenge. Now, research highlights that neurodivergent individuals experience disproportionately high rates of suicidal thoughts and behaviours compared to the general population. For example, studies consistently show that autistic individuals are significantly more likely to experience suicidal ideation, with some estimates suggesting rates more than 3 times higher than those of neurotypical peers. People with ADHD also demonstrate elevated suicidal risk, often linked to impulsivity, co-occurring conditions, and challenges with emotional regulation. Now, I suppose this is probably coming from experience. I do know of some people that are close to me who have those conditions, whether it be ADHD, autism, things like that, and who have had those sort of ideations. Some of them just say they don't want to live anymore. There are others who have just done certain things that I'm not going to disclose on here. And yeah, you know, it is something that I've heard is quite common with neurodivergent people. My wife and I were just talking about this, and some of it can come from bullying because they are different to others. Like this article, or you might have heard when I was reading the article, some of it comes from being labelled, people not understanding their conditions, them not understanding that their brain is working differently to others, and emotional regulation, because let's be honest, some people who are neurodivergent or even have FADS, or fetal alcohol syndrome, do think very differently from normal minded folk, if there's such a thing. And yeah, you know, impulsivity. Sometimes the actions come before the thoughts are fully formed, I suppose, is one way you could put it. Probably not accurate, and so I apologise if I made a faux pas on that one. Anyhow, look, if you are feeling lost, overwhelmed, anxious, depressed, anything like that, and you have these thoughts, there is help out there for you. I am so sorry that you are going through those thoughts. As you just heard earlier, I went through similar things, and it sucks. It sucks to have those feelings. But yeah, there are a lot of helps out there. Mike King was part of a really cool organisation for youths or for people in general, which is called I Am Hope, and they also ran a campaign, or still run a campaign, called Gumboot Friday. Now, that is a way of raising funds to get people some funding for some mental health support. And look, it's something that is woefully lacking in Aotearoa New Zealand, where therapies are expensive, therapists are expensive, and there probably just isn't enough government funding for those top services. Could it be changed? Heck yes. Could there be more support for those for people who need help, mental health support? Definitely. Could governments focus more on that sort of thing instead of lining their own pockets or lining the pockets of their mates and constituents? Hell yeah, you know. Unfortunately, we live in a society where selfishness seems to be more common than not. Those in seats of power love to wield that power for their own benefits or for the benefits of their mates, and unfortunately those that are suffering tend to suffer more because of it. There is a great inequality, not only just in New Zealand but around the world, in those sort of arenas, and it's very sad to have to sit here and see that, no matter who you are. Anyway, I will try and throw up some figures on here, as well as the quotes where I got some of what I've shown or talked about today. And look, again, if you do suffer from depression, anxiety, and you're neurodivergent, have ideations of this sort, again, there is help out there, and I will try and chuck some of those places and websites for you to actually look at and hopefully get the help you need. Anyway, everyone enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy this weekend. Oh, there's a little something. So there was an earthquake centred near Taumaranui early hours this morning. So it's Saturday when I'm recording this. And yeah, couple that with some bad weather, and there's slips and things out on the roads. So please be careful if you are driving. But yeah, again, thank you for joining me today. My email, if you'd like to take part in the discussion so that I don't have to do all this talking about your own health journeys, would be greatly welcomed. I will be sending or trying to send some emails to other people to try and get some background on them and their health journeys, and also some professionals, so that you might be able to hear stuff from the professionals' mouths. Anyway, thank you for spending time with me, and everyone have a great day.